let's look at how to tackle those moments of indecision when you find yourself stuck, not quite knowing how to break free from a certain situation. Very often this happens because you're using the wrong approach for the phase of life you're in. In fact, you need to understand that we mainly experience two possible phases. There's phase A, which is about gathering new data, that is, taking action and observing the feedback that the environment, the reality, gives us. We collect a series of pieces of information about how reality responds to our actions and our efforts. Then there's phase B, in which we take these pieces of information, these data, and build new mental resources, new skills, and new abilities that allow us to progress on our journey. Now, with this premise in mind, which helps us understand the possible scenarios we might encounter, assume for a moment that these two phases exist, and try to grasp that for each phase there is a specific way you must act. If you are in phase A, you need to work on certain aspects, while if you are experiencing phase B in your life, you have to operate in a different way. The risk and the common mistake that often leaves us stuck is using the wrong approach for the phase we're living through. That's why I will explain how phase A and phase B work and show you how to act in each of these two phases. Now let's consider a simple example to help you understand how the mechanism of phase A and phase B works and how to better identify them. Imagine, for instance, being a child in the early stages of life. What you'll do is explore the world around you with your senses, trying to gather information on how reality functions. You'll touch objects that are warmer, colder, harder, softer, and listen to sounds of different frequencies. This is phase A, where you gather data. Then, with that information, you start creating mental models to interpret reality. For example, from noticing that objects can be hot or cold, you develop the idea of temperature, of texture, and the notion that different kinds of sounds exist. This is phase B, where you process the data to establish a new starting point. That's how this mechanism works. It's a cycle, because subsequently, with the idea of temperature or texture, you create a new foundation on which to experiment further, collect the new data, and then develop increasingly complex models. Now I'd like to give you a more current example, so you can understand how this mechanism of phase B also applies to work and everyday life. Imagine you're an advertising professional, and what you might do is create an initial piece of content to test to see how the public reacts to this experiment. This is typically a phase A, in which we make an initial attempt to gather data and information on how the market responds to our initial product. Then, we take these valuable insights to understand what went wrong, what needs to be adjusted, and with all the necessary improvements, we create a new, more powerful, and effective advertisement. This is phase B, using the data and refining it to create something new. As we grow and set more complex goals, it becomes increasingly difficult to recognize whether we are in phase A or phase B. In fact, it takes some effort to properly engage in one of these two phases, because each phase requires a specific approach, as I mentioned earlier. Now, let's look at how to correctly act in phase A and in phase B. In phase A, action is typically required. You need to get out of your comfort zone without overthinking. Perhaps you start with an initial assessment of what might be the right choice, but then you act decisively and consistently along the chosen path. Imagine you're a chef, tasked with launching a new dish or finding a new solution for your restaurant. In an initial phase, you might choose among several ingredients, several combinations. There are many possible routes to take. What matters isn't so much which route you choose, but being consistent with the first choice you make. For example, if for your restaurant you decide to create an excellent fish dish, you can't change your mind halfway through if it isn't coming out exactly as you hope. Imagine switching to a meat dish halfway, then still not liking it, and continuously changing your decision. you end up creating an incredible chaos that forces you to start over. Instead, it's better to finish that fish dish and then reflect on what you didn't like about it. The more times we change direction and decisions, the less effective the data we gather will be in helping us develop new skills. When you find yourself in a state of indecision, don't overthink what. Immediately, choose the ingredient that seems most appropriate and follow through with your idea. In Phase A, what counts isn't so much the choice you make, but the data you obtain. Even if you make an error, that's actually better because it shows you what needs to be improved, a life lesson. You could say that we only achieve our final goals if we have a map guiding us in the right direction. And that map is built by marking many X's on the spots where we shouldn't go. Perhaps the situation at hand seems vitally important, but in reality, it isn't at all. Life is simply asking you to make a decision because you need data, you need information. Getting out of your comfort zone means taking responsibility, choosing a path, and seeing it through, no matter what happens. This will inevitably lead to many mistakes along the way, and that can be uncomfortable because we'll make errors repeatedly, and that can knock us down. But if we persevere, these are nothing more than valuable data on how to improve and how to succeed. Now let's look at how to act in Phase B, which is completely the opposite. We come from a dynamic moment where we've conducted many experiments, made numerous attempts, made our choices, and ended up completing several fish dishes. But now is the time to pause, detach your mind from the work process, and in a moment of calm, taste these dishes to understand what isn't right, the elements that need to be changed or modified in order to gain new skills and new insights to eventually perfect the dish. At a general level in Phase B, you need to calm your nerves, assess how your journey has been up to that point, and then build new thoughts. This process will happen automatically if you have the discipline to isolate yourself from that constant flow of action that has been overwhelming you for a long time. Stop, think, and reflect. This is what you need to do in Phase B. Another very useful point to keep in mind is that there are groups of people who are more inclined towards Phase A and therefore excel at getting out of their comfort zones, while other groups are more aligned with Phase B. Those who are more comfortable with Phase A might have an easier time taking the plunge, but they often find it more challenging to stop and reflect on their actions. On the other hand, people who are more familiar with Phase B tend to create very interesting mental connections and thus make excellent use of the data they have gathered. However, they might struggle a bit more when it comes to stepping out of their comfort zone to obtain new data. On that note, I've created 2 very interesting videos on my channel. One helps you with Phase A, discussing the external environment and how you can create a setting that positively influences you and encourages you to leave your comfort zone. The other video can help you with Phase B, as it talks about self-awareness and how to improve your introspection. I'll leave the links in the description because you might find very useful tips there. So we've understood that using the wrong approach for the phase you're experiencing leads to feeling stuck and creates states of tension and insecurity. Identify these states, start paying more and more attention to them, and you'll see that it will become increasingly easy to understand how you should act. Before concluding this video, I'd like to offer you a very useful perspective that lets you see all these concepts from above with extreme clarity. Before you level up, however, I want to invite you to leave a like if you enjoyed the video. It's a very simple action that costs you little. Please do it if you found these concepts useful, and subscribe to the channel because here you'll find all the perspectives you need to achieve your goals. With that said, let's continue. Phase A and Phase B share a common element. At the base, there is only one potential: your growth. Imagine it as a spring high up. The more potential that accumulates, the more water collects at the source. This increases the state of instability, the internal tensions that push us to act. If we don't act consciously, this water will take whichever course it prefers, uncontrollably, and we will feel life rushing past us, unable to do anything. We will feel dissatisfied, increasingly indecisive, and unsure of how to act. Whereas in the other case, when we choose the path this potential should take, we become fully aware of our actions, because we are converting that mass of water into a river that leads us to success, to results, and gives us satisfaction. That's why decisiveness is so important. As I mentioned earlier, when we are determined in a choice, it's like harnessing that water, this potential, to the fullest extent, while it is still accumulated right at the source. If, on the other hand, you're not decisive and don't act immediately, you let the water disperse into various channels, and you won't be able to harness all that potential. It will be transformed into doubts, fears, and dissatisfaction. Now, if you find yourself in a situation where you have allowed this river to flow uncontrollably and you feel a bit lost, don't worry. This doesn't mean that you lack the skills, qualities, or strength to pursue a goal. It simply means that you've chosen not to control that mass of water at the base of your life, your inner potential. It's waiting because the water at the source eventually forms another reservoir that is ready to flow once again. In that case, you must be the one to take control. It takes some initial effort to guide the river into the channel we prefer, but once that's done, you will feel satisfied, knowing that your initial effort paid off. And that is precisely the situation in which you use the right approach for the phase you're in. Thank you for watching this video. Please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. See you next time.